The words cracked like a whip across the crowded dining room. Every fork stilled, every cup paused mid-air. Who gave you permission to hand out the restaurant's property to beggars? Camille Johnson, a 20-year-old waitress with warm brown skin and a uniform faded from too many washes, stood frozen in the center of the upscale eatery. The morning rush had packed the chain restaurant with office workers in pressed suits and wealthy regulars who treated breakfast like theater. Slow, indulgent, performed for an audience. All eyes now swung to her. The accusation came from Margaret Hensley, the restaurant's middle-aged manager. Margaret, sharp-featured with a helmet of dyed blonde hair, carried herself like a queen in a cheap court. She pointed at Camille, her voice dripping with contempt. "A lowly black girl like you does nothing but tarnish this place. Get out, you're fired." The insult landed heavier than the dismissal. "You people," the words echoed against the walls, louder than the clatter of plates, louder than the hiss of the espresso machine. Camille's cheeks burned hot with humiliation, but her spine did not bend. She held an empty tray tight against her chest, its polished metal trembling with the faint quiver of her hands. Her lips pressed together, but her eyes, dark, steady, and unyielding, locked forward. She would not give Margaret the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The laughter came next, low and cruel, from the diners. A man in a silk tie muttered just loud enough. "Serves her right. You pamper one poor black man, and look what happens." Another chuckled into his coffee. "Kindness from their kind never pays. They don't belong in places like this." No one asked what had really happened. No one cared that Camille's only crime was compassion. Slipping a cup of warm water to an old black man who sat slumped in the corner, his clothes threadbare, his eyes dim with exhaustion, he had whispered he had no money. She hadn't hesitated. She couldn't. For that, she was being cast out. Margaret advanced a step, her heels striking the polished floor. "Wait a second. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us." "Out," she barked again, enjoying the spectacle, her voice swelling with the power of an audience. Camille inhaled once, steadying herself. The heat in her face threatened to betray her, but her chin lifted. She moved with quiet dignity toward the door. The room parted to let her through, but not in respect. It was the parting of disdain, as if even brushing her sleeve would soil them. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband, "Foolish girl, who throws away a job for a stranger?" No one answered her. No one needed to. The silence was judgment enough. Camille's steps carried her to the glass doors. The tray clutched against her chest felt like armor and burden all at once. She had entered the morning shift as invisible labor. She was leaving as public shame, yet she refused to bow her head. The door swung open, spilling her into the sharp air of the city morning. She paused for a moment on the sidewalk, the sound of laughter still echoing behind her. What she did not see was the old man, the same one she had given the cup of water to, still standing by the restaurant's entrance. His name was Thomas Reed, though no one in the dining room had bothered to ask. He was in his late 60s, his skin weathered, his frame stooped but still holding a quiet gravity. In the restaurant, he had looked like any other forgotten soul, dismissed as invisible. Now, in the morning light, his eyes followed Camille as she stepped away. They held a storm of emotions, sorrow for the cruelty she had endured, guilt for the role his presence had played in her downfall, and something more, an ember of recognition, of hope, as if he had glimpsed in her a truth that no one else could see. Camille did not notice him. Her focus was on putting one foot in front of the other, her dignity her only shield. Inside, the restaurant buzzed back to life, the scandal already folding into gossip, the diners returning to their lattes and laptops. Margaret smirked, satisfied at the display of authority, and the old man remained by the doorway, unmoving. He had seen the humiliation. He had seen the strength beneath it, and in that strength he saw something that unsettled him, something that tugged at him like a memory he could not yet name. As Camille disappeared down the street, her figure small against the glittering towers, Thomas's hand clenched against his side. His chest rose and fell with a heavy breath. To the others, he was just an old man loitering outside a cafe. To himself, he was a witness, perhaps even a participant in a story that had only just begun. A story about power and cruelty, yes, but also about compassion, about what it costs, and about what it can reveal. And for Camille Johnson, the young black waitress whose only crime was kindness, this morning was not the end. It was the beginning. Camille Johnson walked out of the restaurant with the taste of humiliation still burning on her tongue. She was 20, tall and slim, her server's uniform hanging like borrowed clothes, her shoes cracked at the sides from too many double shifts. The tray she had just set down felt absurdly light in her hands because it carried the weight of her firing, shouted across the dining room for everyone to witness. She had been dismissed for a single act of kindness, sliding a cup of warm water across to an old black man who had whispered that he had no money but only wanted to rest. That was all, and for that the manager had flayed her alive with words sharp enough to cut bone. But Camille had lived her whole life with the knowledge that some people believed she was disposable. Her mother had died the day she was born. Complications, they said. A tragedy folded into silence. Her father vanished like smoke before she could even form a memory. The state gave her a new file, a new number, and the kind of name you can stamp on paperwork without pausing. She grew up inside the machinery of foster care, dormitories with peeling paint, temporary homes where she was expected to disappear into corners, rules that changed depending on whose kitchen table she sat at. By 18, she aged out, carrying nothing but a thin folder and a thicker resolve. She enrolled in a local community college, studied nursing, believed that if she worked hard enough, her hands could one day heal instead of serve. But tuition was an avalanche she couldn't outrun. After 1 year, she took a leave, promising herself, just 12 months, 1 year of hard labor, then she would return. That promise carried her into the chain restaurant. It was the kind of place built to reassure the affluent. Polished floors, bright menus, coffee always poured into mugs heavy enough to suggest permanence. For the customers, it was comfort. For Camille, it was survival. She took the job because it paid cash into her account every other Friday and because no one else wanted it. From her first day, she understood the unspoken logic. Margaret Hensley, the manager, a woman in her mid-40s with a blazer starched into armor, smiled as she explained the rules. But behind the smile lived calculation. Black staff got the longest shifts, the smallest tips, the least sympathy. They were expected to bend without breaking, to absorb the disdain of both customers and coworkers. Camille absorbed it because she needed the money, but every word lodged like a stone. When she asked for time to take an exam, Margaret's assistant, Dana Pike, a gaunt woman with eyes like sharpened pins, told her flatly, "If you want school, find a job at a school. If you want hours, be here." At the Dish Pass, Tyler Crane, a tattooed line cook who seemed to collect insults the way others collected recipes, muttered loudly, "If you're too good for this, Johnson, go somewhere else. But I don't see anyone lining up to hire you." The customers were worse. Camille had learned to keep her face calm while absorbing their contempt. Evelyn Whitcomb, a regular in pearls and perfume strong enough to announce her arrival, once held out her glass by the rim and murmured, "Do not touch this with those hands." The phrase carried centuries behind it. Camille responded only with politeness. She did not believe in giving her enemies the satisfaction of seeing her wounded, but inside, she cataloged every moment like evidence for a trial no one would ever call. She studied on breaks, sitting behind the dumpster with flashcards. Words like artery and epithelium became lifelines. Dana once found her there and said, "You'll never be a nurse, not from here." Camille answered softly, "If a door opens, it won't ask where I stood while I waited." Still, the weight pressed on her. Every night she counted wages against tuition. Every morning she put the uniform back on as if it were shackles. She endured because she had to, and she whispered to herself that it was only 1 year. And then came the old man. He was seated in the far corner one morning when Camille was clearing tables. His clothes were worn, his eyes tired, his posture collapsing inward. He looked like someone who had weathered decades of storms without shelter. Camille approached as she did with anyone else. "Good morning, sir," she said. "Can I get you something to drink?" His answer came haltingly. "I don't have money. I just needed to sit." Camille's training dictated one response: ask him to leave. Her survival instinct suggested another: walk away before the manager saw. But something in his eyes, and exhaustion edged with shame held her. "I can bring you warm water," she said gently. "It's cold out." He nodded once, gratitude and humiliation colliding in his face. Camille poured the water carefully, placed it on a saucer as though it were fine china, and carried it to his table. Tyler sneered from the kitchen door. "Lady Bountiful," he mocked. "You baptizing him too?" Camille ignored him. She set the cup down as if setting down dignity itself. 10 minutes later, the explosion came. Margaret stormed into the dining room, her voice raised for maximum audience. "Who gave you permission to serve charity from my restaurant?" she demanded. Then the tirade, each word spat like a curse. "You people ruin everything you touch. Pack your things. You're done." The room went silent, then broke into whispers and smirks. Some customers smirked openly. "Deserved," one man muttered. "Good lesson. Don't waste company resources on beggars." Another chuckled. "Warm water? For her kind, that's promotion." Camille stood, face burning, tray in hand, back straight. She did not argue. She knew better than to fight a verdict already rendered. But her eyes, dark, steady, unbroken, met Margaret's, and in that moment her silence spoke louder than any defense. Outside, she set the tray aside and leaned against the brick wall. Her breath came uneven, her cheeks hot. But she repeated to herself, "Dignity is the one thing they cannot take." As she turned to leave, she did not see the old man rise from his table and follow to the window. He stood there, gaze heavy with something between pain and hope, watching her walk into the daylight. She had lost a job, but she had held on to something greater. She had chosen compassion over compliance. And though she could not know it yet, that single act, the cup of warm water, was the beginning of a story far larger than the one Margaret Hensley thought she had ended. The next morning, yesterday's scandal was gone, dissolved into routine like steam off the coffee machines. Camille Johnson's humiliation wasn't even a whisper anymore. In this chain, memory only lasted until the next order. But by noon, a rumor spread like smoke. The entire company had been sold, not just this location, the whole glittering franchise. Managers scrambled, polishing brass handles, barking at staff to stand straighter, speak sweeter, pretend fairness. Fear has its own choreography. At the flagship branch downtown, Margaret Hensley, the middle-aged white manager whose voice could peel paint, nearly wore grooves in the tile pacing. "Check the cutlery again," she hissed. "Wipe every corner. This is the day careers are made or destroyed." Servers nodded, muttering beneath their breath. They knew what she meant. If the new owner didn't like what they saw, heads would roll. And in this place, the lowest heads always rolled first. By late afternoon, the air was tight as a drum. Then came the sound, the hiss of air brakes, the heavy quiet of money arriving. A dark sedan eased to the curb. Curtains twitched inside the dining room. A driver stepped out, crisp in black, and opened the rear door. Thomas Reed emerged, late 60s, tall, shoulders squared by years of carrying more than his share. His suit was understated but perfect. Navy wool with a silk tie knotted just so. His face bore lines carved by loss, sharpened by survival, softened just barely by hard-earned wisdom. Yesterday he had looked like a man the world had discarded. Today he walked like a man who owned doors and the power to open them. The staff froze. Margaret plastered on a smile. "Welcome, sir," she said, voice strained with rehearsed sweetness. "What an honor." Thomas said nothing at first. His eyes scanned the tables, then the corner where he'd sat the day before. Tired, empty-handed, invisible. His voice, when it came, was steady. "Yesterday I was here. Nobody noticed except one young woman. She gave me water when all I had left was dignity. And for that, she was punished." The silence thickened. Some staff looked away. A customer cleared his throat and pretended to check his phone. Margaret jumped in. "A regrettable mistake, sir. We take pride in—" Thomas cut her off, calm as a blade. "Mistake? No. Mistakes are accidents. What I saw yesterday was a decision to treat kindness as a crime. A decision to strip humanity from the only person in this place who remembered it." The room stiffened. Margaret's lips moved, but no sound came. The other employees stood like schoolchildren waiting for the cane. Then Thomas turned slightly, gesturing toward the door. "And if you want to apologize, don't look at me." His gaze sharpened. "Look at her." The door opened. Camille stepped inside. Her uniform was the same. Faded fabric, scuffed shoes, but something had shifted. She carried herself with quiet gravity, no longer bent by shame. Every face in the room turned, the servers who'd laughed at her, the customers who had smirked, the manager who had spat contempt. Recognition spread like a chill. Yesterday's outcast had returned in the company of power. Margaret paled. "Ms. Johnson, Camille met her eyes. "You don't need to finish," she said softly. "Your words yesterday were clear enough." Thomas's voice filled the space again, resonant, unwavering. "Before you decide what you think of her, you need to know what she means to me, and to know that you must know who I am." He let the weight of silence stretch. Decades ago, he had married a woman the world insisted was too good for him. She was white, born into a family that measured worth in bloodlines and bank accounts. He had been neither wealthy nor welcome. To them, he was an intruder. Black, poor, unworthy, and yet she had seen him, believed in him. For a brief, shining moment, they built a life together that was real. That life ended the day she died, giving birth to their daughter. Her family looked at him and saw only loss, only burden. They pushed him out with icy precision, promising they would raise the child, promising she would be safe. But promises rot quickly when hatred keeps them. They erased her existence, changed records, buried her in the system until the trail vanished. By the time he uncovered the truth, his daughter was gone. So he worked. He built companies, amassed fortunes, carved out credibility sharp enough to cut through the walls once closed to him. All the while he carried a single photograph, his infant daughter, with her mother's eyes gazing out of time. That picture became his compass, his lifeline. And then, yesterday, he had seen those same eyes again, alive, unyielding in Camille. The silence cracked into gasps. A server whispered, "No, it can't be." Another muttered, "His daughter?" Margaret staggered back, voice trembling. You can't mean..." "That's exactly what I mean," Thomas said. "Camille Johnson is my daughter." The words detonated. Dana Pike, the assistant manager, covered her mouth. Tyler Crane, the cook who had mocked her, looked suddenly very small. Customers who once smirked at her kindness now shifted, ashamed. Camille herself stood frozen. The weight of a past she'd never known pressed on her. But Thomas met her eyes with something unshakable. Recognition, belonging, truth. For a moment she felt what she'd never dared, claimed. Thomas turned back to the staff. "Yesterday you fired her for giving me water. You said she made this place look bad. No, she made this place look human. And that terrified you." Camille found her voice, steady though her hands trembled. "I've spent my life in rooms where people decide my worth before I speak. Yesterday I learned something. Kindness is not weakness, and the only thing more dangerous than cruelty is silence." Her words pierced the room. Several employees lowered their heads. A woman at a table of executives whispered, "She's right." Margaret, desperate, tried again. "Mr. Reed, had we known?" "You didn't need to know," Thomas cut in. "Decency should not require pedigree. A last name should not be the price of compassion." Camille drew a slow breath. "You told me I made this place look bad," she said to Margaret. "But what you revealed was the truth, without mercy, without respect. This place was already rotten." The room sank under the weight of those words. Shame is heaviest when spoken aloud. Finally, Thomas's voice, softer now, broke the stillness.
"Yesterday, Camille gave me water. Today, she gives all of you a mirror. Look into it. Decide what you see."
Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. At last she managed. "Miss Johnson, I was wrong. I humiliated you. I regret it." Dana added, shaky, "I mocked you when I should have stood with you. I'm sorry." Even Tyler muttered, "I treated you like nothing. That was on me." Camille listened but didn't rescue them with forgiveness. She let their words hang where they belonged. Apologies are not absolution. They are acknowledgments. Thomas placed a steady hand on Camille's shoulder. His eyes softened, almost breaking. "Yesterday you thought you were giving a stranger water. In truth, you gave a father back his daughter." Camille's throat closed with emotion. For the first time, she felt the shape of family in her bones. A connection not imagined, not hoped for, real. And in that crowded dining room, once the stage of her humiliation, something shifted. Power tilted. A place that had thrived on hierarchy had just been turned inside out by one act of kindness and one man's revelation. The scene held like a portrait. Camille standing tall, Thomas beside her, the staff chastened, the customers silenced. Yesterday she had been invisible. Today she was undeniable. Thomas Reed stood firm at the center of the dining room, his hand resting gently on Camille Johnson's shoulder. His gaze shifted to Margaret Hensley, the white manager who only yesterday had shouted her down in front of strangers, reducing kindness to a crime. "Yesterday," Thomas said, his voice calm but edged with steel, "you humiliated my daughter for offering a cup of warm water. Today you will learn what real consequences feel like. From this moment forward, you have no place in this company." The words landed like a gavel strike. Margaret's legs trembled. Her veneer of authority cracked, leaving only desperation. "Please, Mr. Reed," she stammered, clutching her clipboard, as if it could anchor her to her job. I've given this company 20 years. It was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. Don't end my career over one incident." Thomas's voice remained steady. "Was one incident. It was the truth of who you are revealed in one moment. Leadership isn't measured by years in uniform. It's measured by what you do when power is yours and no one is watching. Yesterday you chose cruelty. That choice defines you." The room was silent but electric. The other white employees stared at the floor, their confidence dissolved. The wealthy patrons who had laughed along now shifted uneasily, eyes downcast. Their shame was collective, their complicity undeniable. Margaret sank to her knees, her words breaking into pleas. "I beg you, sir. I can change. Give me another chance." But Thomas's face was unyielding. "Mercy belongs to those who show it. You showed none." His voice dropped to a near whisper, but every word cut. "Leave this place." Security staff, silent until now, stepped forward. Margaret's clipboard clattered to the floor as they guided her toward the door. She twisted back, her eyes wild, muttering, "It can't be a black. The world's upside down." Her voice cracked, disbelieving. "It isn't right." The door closed behind her. For the first time in years, the chain restaurant was free of her voice. The silence she left behind was heavier than her presence. Heads bent. No one dared to speak. Then Thomas turned to the room, his tone softening but carrying even greater weight. "Let today be a lesson," he said, scanning faces one by one. "Titles will not protect you. Uniforms will not protect you. Wealth will not protect you. The only shield worth carrying is integrity. Without it, you are already stripped bare." Then he looked down at Camille. His voice broke ever so slightly, emotion rising. "From this day forward, you will never face injustice alone again. You will help me lead this company. Together, we will make it a place where no one is punished for compassion, and where dignity is not rationed by skin color." Camille's breath caught. Her chest rose, steady and proud. After years of swallowing her words, she felt them break free. "All my life I was told I was less," she said quietly, but her voice carried through the restaurant. "But less to who? Those afraid to see their own cruelty? Those who confuse status with worth? No one in this world is less than human. And if that truth costs me work, comfort, or safety, so be it. Because without it, we're nothing." Somewhere in the back, a young busboy lifted his head. His eyes glistened, reflecting a hope he hadn't dared before. A patron murmured to her husband, "She's right. She's absolutely right." And slowly, the current shifted. People who had laughed yesterday now clapped hesitantly, then firmly, the sound rising like rainfall. For the first time, Camille wasn't invisible. She was undeniable. That evening, the storm of the day gave way to quiet. In a modest but warm new home Thomas had purchased near the university, father and daughter sat together. The walls glowed golden with lamplight. For Camille, it felt like the first safe place she had ever known. Thomas poured tea, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. Then he asked the question that had burned since yesterday. "Tell me, Camille, why did you give me that cup of water?" She smiled faintly. her eyes wet. Because I couldn't leave someone thirsty. Not when I had the chance to help. I've lost jobs before. I've lost respect before. But if I lost my humanity, then I'd truly have nothing. Thomas's eyes softened, pride breaking through the grief that had long caged him. From that very moment, he said, voice low, I knew you carried both my blood and your mother's. That compassion and quiet pride have lived in you since the day you were born, far more convincing than the DNA test result we later receive. Camille broke. Tears slid down her cheeks as she leaned forward, clutching him in an embrace that spanned decades of absence. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel abandoned. She felt claimed. The days that followed rewrote the story of both father and daughter. Margaret Hensley's name faded into whispers of disgrace, a warning to anyone who mistook cruelty for power. Employees who once sneered began to soften, chastened by the reckoning they had witnessed. Customers spoke differently too, aware now that dignity could no longer be denied at the door. And Camille? She returned to school with her tuition secured, her future open. At the same time, she began working alongside her father to reshape the chain, not as a palace of privilege, but as a place where anyone could sit, work, or serve without humiliation. Thomas Reed had spent years amassing wealth to buy influence, but in the end it wasn't money that redefined his legacy. It was his daughter's single act of defiance against indifference, the cup of water that revealed everything. Justice had been done. Family had been restored, and a future built not on fear but on dignity had begun. Message it. Sometimes the hardest truths arrive not through documents or proof, but through the quiet courage we witness in each other. This story reminds us that love is more than biology. It's the daily choice to recognize what we share, even when the world tries to measure it with tests and papers. The father's smile, the child's steady heart, and the unspoken history between them all speak louder than any lab result. Compassion, dignity, and the pride of knowing where we come from are written in the way we live, not the ink on a page,